All right, hey, let's get straight to the topic. And last year we had Esther Dyson, who is one of the highest ranked angel investor in healthcare based in New York, here discussing in this forum. And I was asking from her that what is the kind of a healthcare market like? And she actually gave a really good, like a three-tier model. First, there is the bad health, which is basically McDonald's and hamburgers and tobacco and all that stuff. Then there is the traditional health, which is the pharmaceuticals and treating diseases, hospitals, which needs to be like really become more effective. And then the third market that she was interested in and that I'm mostly interested in is the new health. So all the apps, the health gadgets, and everything that goes mostly direct to consumer. And I personally believe that that's like the super big opportunity for entrepreneurs coming from the areas that are not necessarily even related to healthcare. I would like to ask from the panel that what do you think, like, where is the next big thing in health? Is it in any of these three buckets, and how you are viewing it?
Yeah, so I'm with Initial Capital, and I've predominantly spent most of my career in computer games, building 2 companies, and I'm now focused on investing in early stage businesses. And what I find exciting about health right now, and oh, by the way, I'm invested in Better Doctor, I'm invested in Basis, the sensor watch and service, as well as Valcare, the device that shines lights in your ear in order to improve your cognitive performance and prevent seasonal affective disorder. But what's exciting to me about health right now is that so far pretty much the entire market is focused on effectively curing you when you're sick. A doctor looks at your data and tries to cure you one way or the other. Whereas now that with connectivity and sensors, we actually are beginning to be able to prevent getting sick in the first place. And whereas cure is predominantly a professional-driven market where you actually need to be a doctor to help cure somebody, prevention, on the other hand, actually relies a lot on basic common sense like nutrition and exercise. And those are the kinds of things where consumer services, much like games, can actually help make a huge difference. And I think big businesses will be built on the basis of great sensors plus great consumer services put together.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much, Timo, for the invitation, first of all. So I spend most of my weeks really investing on the hardcore biotech drugs and chemistry side of the equation. And the reason why I'm here, and thank you for the invitation, Timo, is really because we are clearly looking very intensely at Index on the post-chemistry side of the equation in the healthcare markets. And we think clearly that the post-chemistry space can really impact and maybe disrupt, not completely, but to a big extent, the healthcare structures, simply for one reason. Today, it's very clear that healthcare outcomes depend maybe 60%, 70% on chemistry, so the drugs that need to be developed over many years with many dollars. But the other 30, 40% really depend on the behavior of the patient. Patient engagement, readmissions, monitoring at a distance, really the patient behavior. Now, that part, the 30, 40% of the outcome, it's something which, as you're saying, can really be subject to behavioral impact. And now with the new technologies and with the space and with the trends that are that we are seeing unfold, very clearly, behavioral impact through social media, we of course are more influenced by our friends and people that refer to us rather than by a doctor, right? Or remote sensing, remote monitoring. These are things, especially for chronic diseases, which represent 80% of the spend in healthcare. Chronic diseases are going to get beneficially impacted by remote sensing, continuous monitoring, and this kind of information can really be fed back through the consumer into the medical community. So on these 30, 40%, very clearly, we see that the current focus and explosion of digital health kind of approaches is going to have a major impact in the healthcare industry.
Yeah. Ari, do you have a view on this?
I think you kind of touched a lot of the points that I've been talking before, and I agree completely. My background when I came to healthcare was maybe a bit different because I only knew what my mom told me. Eat well, sleep enough, and exercise every day. And that was my beginning, and over the last 2.5 years, I have learned a lot, but still I don't really know much about what Francesco is talking here. So to me, really, the healthcare change is happening between you as a person and what you do to yourself. So it's about empowering yourself, becoming more of a CEO of your health. So I think all the devices and all the different things that are making that happen is very valuable in my mind.
Okay. So Francesco, how are you making sense when you are kind of starting to invest in this post-chemistry world? There's like a huge buzz. I mean, new sensors are coming to market almost weekly with well-funded kind of a backing and all of that. So how are you making sense out of market? Where to invest? I mean, there's such a big buzz currently.
You're right. It's very, very difficult. And actually, I think at Index we have a very fortunate situation of having both a very, very strong consumer internet IT-based practice, and actually Ben and Neil and Nina are in the audience, or they should be in the audience, I hope, but they're very, very strong. And so we really make it or try to leverage a lot of value out of the intersection of the biotech part of the firm that really understands, or hopefully understands, the constraints of the incumbents, right? Because that is really what we have to cope with in a negative sense, and on the positive sense, we can leverage that expertise, but at the same time, it's really consumer. So we really need to look at consumer behavior. It's really more of a consumer behavior rather than a business opportunity, even though I would not want to really give the message that, in our opinion, it's only about a consumer opportunity, this digital market expansion. It's really, there is a lot of business opportunity, B2B opportunities in terms of cost reduction, cost containment. Of course, with ACA and Obamacare, there is a big push towards that direction. But it's very, very tricky, of course. Yeah.
So Kristian and Ari, what is the biggest thing that the games guy can bring to healthcare? Are you taken seriously? Because, I mean, healthcare is, Francesco was just saying that he is now the kind of feeling home here, because typically the healthcare guys and panels are like gray hairs and like old guys, because experience is kind of a prerequisite in being there. So are they taking you seriously, Kristian and Ari?
Well, I mean,
like the guy with the long hair and T-shirt.
Well, no, not every day. I've been in a couple of big conferences. One was 250 CEOs of different pharma companies. I was the only digital guy there. I felt very out of place. I was the youngest guy in the room. Then I was in another conference that is a Future Med, talking about the future of medicine, next 25 years from today. And I was more in place. But I think gaming is a very interesting area, because it's basically building things that people really love to do. And if we think about exercise, the eating, the things I mentioned already, if we can build things that are making it better and easier for us to live our life in a way we would love to live our life, there's always the donut or the cronut or the next candy waiting for us. If there's something that can change our behavior and direct us into being better me and better ourselves, I think that's hugely valuable, and games can definitely do that.
I think that's right. And I think at the end of the day, you should do what you're good at. And what I find really interesting in health is that there's lots of companies that are good at making sensors of different kinds. There's companies that are pretty good at thinking about the chemistry and the very fundamentals of the kind of medicines we need to make moving forward, or other therapeutic devices of different forms. What actually traditional healthcare companies are not very good at all is to talk directly to consumers, because it's never been a challenge, it's never been a core competence of these companies. And in particular, when medical devices are connected moving forward in such a way that your data actually lies somewhere else, and you can actually have this ongoing relationship with the consumer, how to manage that and how to create an interesting experience for the consumer, not add progress bars everywhere and add achievements and extra bonus points everywhere, but rather just how to create an interesting service design for the consumer, and perhaps even how to get the consumer to pay for some of those things over time. That is an area where games are by far the cutting edge in the world in terms of design. And that's where I think folks with that background can actually add an awful lot of value, not to how you design a great sensor, not to the chemistry of medicine, but rather to the consumerization, if you like, of medicine, how to actually manage that engagement relationship with the consumer, how to make it fun and interesting for the consumer to spend the extra minute or the extra hour on your service over time. And that's why I think games guys make a very valid contribution.
Yeah, if I can add a comment, Timo. So I totally agree. I think that is really the key difference when we're looking at healthcare, hardcore businesses, chemistry businesses, and consumer businesses. There is one caveat that I would add, which is people will go onto healthcare. So the consumerization of healthcare is, however, bottlenecked or limited or floored by the fact that it's not fun, right? They don't go there unless it's for wellness applications.
Yeah.
But if it's for monitoring conditions, chronic conditions, in the first place, it's not for fun reasons, right? That you go there. You go there because your mom told you, be the CEO of your health. My mom told me the same thing, and that's the right thing. But in the first place, we cannot imagine that it's going to be game playing, game fun. It's going to be for other applications, a lot of fun. Now, and that is the disruptiveness that these kind of ventures really have to bring to the healthcare industry. You can make it as engaging and as pleasant and as feasible and with a low barrier as much as possible, keeping in mind that it's always about health. And so it's not just pure fun, unless we're talking about, of course, wellness application, fitness application, body control kind of things, which is a slightly adjacent but different field.
Yeah, so I'll actually add to that. I think the word gamification is way overused, and it implies, I think, the folks who do badly at this try to make something fun that isn't fun. Like you just don't end up with a great service. I think it's more sort of at a lower level, applying some of those design principles, applying some of those interaction principles of how do you create a service that ultimately feels good and feels good to use. And I think that's very much a consumer's skill that some folks from the game industry can be good
Hey,
at.
why hasn't anybody done it yet? I mean, there's a lot of people and entrepreneurs, but nobody has cracked it. I mean, there's not the health app in App Store that people love, right? I mean, there are games that people love. So what's the reason? And can you actually create a casual health app or wellness or app that people actually fell in love with? Is that possible? Because I've been wondering it myself.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely possible. I think to me this feels like the first mobile gaming panels I sat on in events in 2002 when people said, could mobile games ever be good?
Oh, that's
that
a good line.
Yeah, exactly,
everybody needs to remember that.
Yeah, exactly. No, and that is a long time ago, right? And I think it's just, as an industry, we know what we need to do, and it'll take a long time through trial and error, through various kind of attempts to combine different things together to see if we can get there. So I certainly think there's a bunch of companies this year who have better apps than were there last year.
Yeah,
but I still
right.
think most companies have ways to go on this. And frankly, that's why, as an investor, I think it's an exciting place to be.
Yeah. So you haven't invested in any of mobile app companies in health, right?
No, not yet, no.
Yeah, and the reason is?
No, the reason is, frankly, for me, I keep on looking for opportunities and for companies that are creating the combinations of teams that are making something that I ultimately would be sort of wanting to create myself, if that makes sense. And I take a look at this, a lot of these different spaces. I haven't found anything that has been, for me, the thing that I wanted to go after. Doesn't mean many of them won't be successful.
Of course. Yeah.
But I think Kristian, you're making a really good point on this, because it is about the beginning. We are seeing the 1.0s. Soon we're going to see the 1.5s, 2.0s, 3.0. The 3.0 will be something that we're going to be like, wow, this is transformational. We're going to be amazed. That's the iPhone moment. And it might be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. And I think it's funny because it's going to be bridging together the pharma and the technology. Now we are seeing consumer adoption growing, like Fitbit is growing like wildfire. A lot of people have here some sort of a wrist device already. That's the beginning. It will be way better going forward. Somebody told me that in 10 years' time, we're going to have implantable, eatable, even tattooable sensors. Think about that. That's science fiction today. It will be reality in 10 years. And these are the tools that are going to make it interesting for the pharma as well. Once we get the data pipeline open, we get the data in, we can make way better healthcare. We can understand more about the consumers and the patients every day, not just when we go to a doctor and take the blood out. We can do that every day. It's very exciting, I think.
Yeah. So Francesco, you see a lot of companies, so big data in health. When will we see some results out of that?
Sorry.
Kind of using big data in health, more broadly. Your opinion on that?
So we have already some results, right? Vivo is a major success, right? So we'll see where the next comes from. But actually, before I rebound on that, I wanted to go on something that Kristian was saying, which I really totally agree. And I think one of the areas where, for healthcare applications, we have really found the maximum overlap or the best extent to which we can sort of gamify the applications is really cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, where the experience that you would otherwise have in front of a doctor with what it sounds like a very medical kind of framework, with your iPhone, which becomes also a medical device that is always with you, that can really talk to you on a one-to-one basis. Cognitive behavioral therapy, in which we have made one investment of which we are really very excited about, is really the closest that it gets to really be so engaging and such an important experience that even though it's still medical, but it's something that we feel there's going to be a lot of traction on in the near future in that kind of space.
And I think that's right. And actually, the thing that's interesting to me ultimately is for all of these apps is answering the so what. Okay, so I've 8,542 steps today. So what? Okay, so my resting pulse right now is what, 52. So what? Good or bad? What does it mean? And or I can upload and look at massively complicated graphs on my computer saying this is how many steps I took yesterday and the day before, and by the way, that was combined with this many stairs and this many minutes of cycling. So what? The challenge I would have for folks who are working on health apps, at the preventive end is try to answer the so what. Try to link it back to outcomes. Try to link it back to what I'm trying to achieve as a person and how to make that kind of the link between all this information that we're collecting and the thing I'm trying to achieve very tangible. Because my favorite example of still what continues to be the killer app in health is actually a bathroom scale. Because it's incredibly clear. It shows how much you weigh. It shows how much you weigh, or how much you weighed yesterday, and if that's good or bad, because there's a very objective measure of are you now lighter than you were a week ago or you were a month ago. So the outcome, the link to what you're doing and the outcome is very, very clear. Yeah. 8,762 steps doesn't mean that much. So I think that sort of creating that sense of meaning is incredibly important.
Yeah. Hey, since this is a new health panel, there's a lot of talk about the $1,000 genome and all that. So Francesco, any idea, what's your view on that?
Oh, yeah,
so how is it going to be reality, and if it's not or yes, how it's going to change health?
So I don't only think that it's going to be a reality. We are at $3,000-4,000 a genome right now, right? It's absolutely going to be a reality, and that is going to be really a Rosetta Stone for healthcare going forward. That is a really big piece of advance. I really think is like the start of an industrial revolution, really. Because it's going to be it's not yet for consumers. I don't want to be misunderstood. So being able to sequence the full genome is a major Rosetta Stone, but still it's not a B2C application. I really don't think that it's not yet personal genomics. Because personal genomics, to be really relevant, as you were saying, you need to know what to do with those genes. The importance of this this development is really that now it's really very easy for the businesses to really start putting together hundreds of thousands, millions of sequences, which are going to, by be linking to phenotypes and clinical outcomes, to be able to say, this little piece of sequence that you, A, B, C person, you have, then you are going to have to do this. So it's absolutely going to be the center masterpiece of consumerization, but not yet now, in a few years. Yeah. The problem is that we're, in my opinion, that we're bootstrapping too quickly to consumerize the sequences. There are several sites that offer this, and I don't really know how to use that. Sorry.
Well, I think the DNA is one element, but another one is really the big data. So we are in a stage now that the data is siloed. So there might be a system here and a system there. I do the DNA, it's going to be a third system. And I came to healthcare because of personal struggles. And we had DVDs full of data that we took to our doctor. Here is 2 terabytes of data. Can you help us? And the doctor had 5 minutes time to look at the data. Not even enough time to open the envelopes for the DVDs. Not to even look at them. So that's the reality today. And I think it takes time before we get single systems that are bigger. Google tried to do something. Microsoft has a health vault. Nobody has been able to do a dent yet on the stage where we have one pile where you can throw all your data and then somebody can crunch it. And I think there's a very interesting thing happening now. The big companies, Google had their own initiative now, and IBM is spending a lot of time today, and they are putting their Watson supercomputer and throwing health data and learning and teaching the computer to actually become a doctor. It's already fairly okay. It's not great, but in 5 years' time, that Watson computer can be helping doctors to do better diagnosis. So this is the beginning of the big data, and I think DNA will be one part of it. And I think a doctor, if they don't do sequencing before a visit for a consumer or patient, they will be doing malpractice in maybe 10 years' time. So you must do it before you prescribe a medicine, for example. And we are far away.
Yeah, to build on that, so what I think is exciting on that front is that not only will you have more personal information about yourself through, as genomics becomes, we learn the Rosetta Stone, if you like, of that over the next 5 to 10 years, but rather, the other thing is that as we figure out how to solve the big data problem, as opposed to always comparing to averages, whatever your condition happens to be, doctors are trained on averages today, right? What is the average life expectation of this thing, or what is the average treatment for that? Not only can you personalize it through you, but you can actually monitor what does your data look like compared to everybody else who happens to have that disease right now, or who happens to have your combination of things. You can slice and dice the data in a way that actually makes your own understanding of your condition much more meaningful. And ideally, it should really help you connect with other folks who also happen to suffer from your condition. Because at the end of the day, in any specific case, especially with rare diseases, a doctor may only see 2 or 3 of those cases in their entire life. Whereas if with the right, correct big data solutions, you should be able to have access to thousands of people, data sets, if you like, who happen to have those conditions. And you're no longer you don't stand out. You're not sort of a unicorn for the doctor. You rather are there's many cases to compare you with, if you like. So I think big data is a huge part of it. Genomics is a huge part of it. There's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. So we need to start wrapping up. So this has been like a super good discussion, and I just need to kind of conclude who is on the stage. So there's the games entrepreneur who has turned into health investor in a serious manner, and he will develop some gray hair soon, I'm pretty sure. And then there is the index partner who is kind of shifting to the post-chemistry world of kind of a health investing. Still today doing the majority in the kind of how would I say, traditional therapies in chronic diseases, which is the big thing, but there is a kind of a shift towards the post-chemistry. And then there's a guy who used to run game studios, but who is currently, because of his mom, a health entrepreneur. Is that a good summary of who we have here, right?
It's about right.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thanks. Let's give applause to the guys.